Chapter 7. Out. Until I had that old roll of film developed and saw the sign with the green letters on it hanging over the porch, I had never heard of Liberty, New York. It's not exactly a famous place, just a small town in the Catskill Mountains, about 2.5 hours northwest of New York City. But because I knew that my mother and maybe my grandmother too had been there, suddenly it became the most important place in the world to me. If Mama truly was pregnant with me in the picture, that meant the photos had been taken almost 13 years earlier. I was afraid that Hilltop Home wouldn't still be there. But Bernadette got the number from information without any problem, and we called them up. I stood next to Bernadette, firing questions at her a mile a minute as she spoke to the person on the other end of the phone. Ask them if Mama lived there. Tell them she was at a big Christmas party, maybe with her mother. Bernadette tried to ask all those questions and more, but for some reason the person on the other end wouldn't let her finish a sentence. Yes, I understand, but if you could just tell me if... Yeah, I see, but all we really need you to do is look in your records. Is that too much to... Oh, okay, all right. Finally, Bernadette gave her phone number and hung up. Well, what happened? What did they say? I asked. About all I managed to get out of her was that Hilltop is a home for handicapped people, and the only person authorized to answer personal questions about it is somebody named Thurman Hill. Well, then we need to talk to Thurman Hill right away, I said. He isn't there today. She took my number and said he'd call me back. But Thurman Hill didn't call back. Not that day or the next. So Bernadette called again. And again. Every time she got the same runabout about how Mr. Hill was the only one who could answer our questions, only he wasn't ever there. Bernadette called back so many times, finally the woman at Hilltop started putting her on hold as soon as she heard Bernadette's voice, and then she'd just leave us hanging like that and never come back. Long distance is expensive, Heidi-ho, and Thurman Hill, that miserable four-letter word, clearly doesn't intend to return our phone calls. Bernadette never swore in front of me, so when she got really mad, she substituted four-letter word for the real four-letter curses. I knew all the real ones from Xander anyway. I'd even made a list of them in code in my notebook. I think it's time for a postal approach, she said. Bernadette had had a lot of practice getting what she wanted by talking to people on the phone or writing them letters. But no matter what she did, she couldn't get anywhere with Hilltop. 3 weeks passed, and still we had no answers to our letters or calls. I was beside myself. Bernie tried to distract me by keeping my hands busy. We put new shelf paper in the kitchen cabinets, and one weekend she set me to cleaning out all the closets in our apartment. I was on my hands and knees, pulling out boxes and squashed shoes and a battered old suitcase from the back of Mama's closet, when I felt something soft wadded up in the far corner under a stack of old magazines. It was a moth-eaten red sweater. The same red sweater with reindeer on it that the blonde woman in the photograph at Hilltop Home had been wearing. She was here, Bernie, I cried, holding up the crumpled sweater for her to see. My Grammy was here. There's proof. After that, there was no distracting me. I couldn't think about anything but Hilltop. All we're asking them to do is just look up Mama's name in the files. Why is that so hard? I asked. I don't know, baby, but it makes me so mad. I'd like to march right into Thurman Hill's stuffy old office and sit on him until he coughs up the information. That's it, Bernie, I said, jumping up excitedly. That's exactly what we have to do. We have to go see Thurman Hill. We have to go there and make him tell us about Mama. Baby, Bernadette said softly, you know we can't do that. I can't Go out? How do you know? How do you know you can't? I asked. When's the last time you tried, Bernie? Maybe the AP is gone. Maybe you're better and you just don't know it. It's not gone, Heidi. Things don't just go. Colds do, and pimples. How do you know AP just doesn't go too? Maybe it does. Maybe it has, I said. I was really excited now. I went to the front door, pulled it wide open. Come on, Bernie, try. Please try. For me? Heidi, I can't, Bernadette said. Her voice was tight, and I noticed her hands trembling. You make Mama try. That's why she can open cans, Bernie, and comb her hair. You make me try, too. Cursive, Bernie, Shakespeare, you made me try. That's all I'm asking you to do. Try. Bernadette stood up, grasping the arm of the couch for support. Her legs wobbled under her, but she made her way slowly toward me, toward the open door. I don't know, she said. You don't understand, Heidi. If I go out, if I'm outside, I might. If I go out, nothing will happen, Bernie. Just one step into the hall. That's all you have to do. One step. The first step. Like when you taught me the cursive A, remember? Round the block, up, down, curl the tail, onto the next. You can do it, Bernie. I know you can. Bernadette took hold of the doorknob, her knuckles white with fear. She stood like that for a minute with her eyes closed tight. Round the block, up, down, curl the tail onto the next, she whispered under her breath. Round the block, up, down, curl the tail onto the next. Then she took a deep breath, let go of the doorknob, and stepped out into the hall. You did it, I shouted. You're out, Bernie. I knew you could do it. You're out. Well, the best way to describe what happened next is that in the few seconds between when Bernadette let go of the knob and when she collapsed on the floor, her body went from solid to liquid. Her legs juiced out from under her, and she fell in a heap, her breath coming loud and fast, her eyelids fluttering as her head rolled backward like a broken doll's. Bernie, I cried, rushing to her. Save me, she managed to whisper between gasps. I'm drowning. I stood behind her, taking hold of her under the arms and trying with all my might to pull her back inside. But she was too heavy. Bernie was short, but not small. Peasant stock, she always said, low to the ground and built for business. Help me, Heidi, she groaned. I heard a door scrape open below us and familiar heavy footsteps on the stairs. Xander, I screamed. Hurry, up here. We need help. A minute later, Xander's pasty round face peered around the top of the staircase. He was out of breath from climbing the one flight up. He had a bag of barbecue chips in one hand and a grape soda in the other. His jaw dropped when he saw Bernadette on the floor. Geez, he said, what's the matter with her? Hurry, help me pull her inside, I said. He didn't move, just stood there nervously licking his spicy red fingertips. Man, she's white, he said, like a freaking ghost. Xander, come on, I cried. Help me get her inside. Xander sighed and put his chips and soda down. Then he came and took one of Bernie's arms in his hands. She's not going to croak, is she? He whispered, 'cause I never seen nobody croak in real life. I grabbed Bernie's other arm and started pulling. One leg of her stockings caught on a nail on the floor and ripped loudly as we tugged. She moaned and went completely limp, which made her feel even heavier. But somehow, eventually, we managed to drag her across the welcome mat back inside. She don't look so good. Do you want me to call 911? He asked. I was terrified. If we called 911, they'd come and take Bernie away. What would Mom and I do? How would we survive without Bernie? I started to cry. Xander stood for a minute looking down at Bernie's still body and shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot. Is she drunk? He asked. Because if that's what it is, I can tell you, she won't wake up for a while. And when she does, you gotta keep real quiet and make her drink hot coffee even if she cusses you out for it. You got coffee? Yes, but she's not drunk, I said, wiping my nose on my sleeve. It's okay, I won't tell nobody, he said. I felt a sliver of truth slip under my skin, a jagged little splinter of what lay underneath all those tales about war heroes and medals of honor. Bernie stirred and moaned. Xander quickly knelt down next to me, and we both fanned her furiously with our hands as she came around. Please be okay, I whispered. Please, Bernie, come back. It seemed like forever before the color returned to Bernie's face and she opened her eyes. I sat beside her on the floor the whole time, stroking her arm and talking softly to her, the way she always did with Mama when she was waking up from one of her headache naps. When Bernadette was finally able to sit up, I sat cross-legged and scooched very close, putting one arm around her and pressing her head against my shoulder while I rocked gently back and forth. Some of her long gray hair had come loose from the thick rope of braid she always wore, and I smoothed it away from her face, tucking it back into the weave. Done, 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 Bernie, shh, I whispered. Xander propped himself up against the door and watched. He didn't say or do anything more after that, but it was enough that he stayed. When Bernie was able to sit up and drink some water, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I'd spent hours with Xander, listening to him tell stories out on the stoop, but until that day, I hadn't really known him. Then, just like with the first pack of Twinkies he'd given me without my asking, he'd handed me a tiny scrap of truth. After that, everything changed. He would never be fat or dim-witted in my eyes again. I was only just beginning to see how powerful the truth could be.